Hey guys, Wix100 here, and I have another web design tutorial for you. This time I am going to be showing you guys how to make a header and a footer for your website. So first things first, I would like to make a correction to one of my previous tutorials. The H1, H2, H3, etc. are not headers, they're headings. So these are different than what I'm going to be showing you. I'm talking about, like, when I say header for this one, I mean like the bar at the top of a web page that usually has buttons to go to other pages, a logo probably, maybe some other information, and the bar at the bottom that has like copyright information and some other links. So that's what I mean by header and footer for this tutorial. The previous tutorial, when I said header, run header 2, header 3, those are heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. Anyway, so first thing we're going to do is the header. So in the body, you want to type header, and then I'm going to show you guys the code that I use for the headers that I make for my website. You guys can put whatever you want in this header, but I'm going to do it the way I always do it for websites that I design. So you want an image, and then you want source equals, and I'm going to do assets, pictures, 512, infinity programming, infinity color solid.png, because that's the only image I have in the folders for my website. But you can do whatever image you want. And then alt. The alt text is what appears if the image cannot be found. It usually puts like a little X in the corner and then says the text. I think if you hover over the image, it also shows the alt text. I'm just going to say infinity programming logo. And then after that, if you want to add a button, you put an anchor. So like down here, the anchor is a link, so you want to do href equals, and then I'm just gonna say index.html because we don't have any other HTML files in this, so can't really go anywhere else. I mean, I could link it to like Google or something. And so then actually I also want to do a class equals nav, and so in here I'm gonna say home, and then actually let's put 2 more links in. Actually let's just do one more and say infinity programming web page, and then this would be https://wix100.github.io/ I don't know the link. Oh, it's just /infinity programming. Wasn't sure if it was /channel or /infinity programming. There we go. And so that'll take us there. And then also, if you want a drop down button, you would do div class equals drop down, and then in that div you want to put another anchor with the class of nav, and you can make this link wherever you want, or you could just remove the link and it would act as if it's not a link, but you could still use the anchor part for something. And let's just say social media, and then you want another div, and this div is gonna have the class of drop down content. And so in there you would put more nav anchors. So let's say Twitter, YouTube, and Discord. And so then say href. By the way, to do column editing like this, you can just select the start location, hold Alt and Shift, and select the next location, and it highlights those columns. Or you could do it all like that, and it types on all those lines. Okay. And then so let's get my Twitter. That should be the link to my Twitter. Yes, it is. And so in here, then youtube.com/wix100. I don't want that video to play, so I'm going to leave that now. And then on here, let's copy link, and that's the link to the Infinity Programming Discord. But we're not done with the header yet, because right now, if we hit refresh, you see this, it's none of it's styled right, it's all terrible. So what we need to do is in this styles folder, we need to do new file and say header.css. And we also need to copy this line and duplicate it and type header. The reason why I'm putting the header CSS in a separate file instead of just using the style.css that we did before is because if you want to have pages on your site that have a different header or whatnot, it's better to compartmentalize the styles so that you don't have to import the entire style sheet with some styles that you don't want and then import another style sheet to override that. So this way you just import whatever sections you want. And so in here you want to first of all style the header element. So display block so that it takes up the whole width of the page and puts everything else either above it or below it instead of next to it. Color can be whatever you want. I'm gonna say white, and then width 100% just to make sure that it's the full width of the page. Then margin 0 and padding 0 so that it doesn't do weird spacing, because we want the header to be the entire width and not have any padding on it or any margins, because we're going to do that with the individual elements. We just want the header to act as just a straight up container. And then let's say background actually, let's do back color. And let's just make it pure black. Then we want header asterisk. And so that should get all elements that are inside the header. That says beater. I don't want beater, I want header. And so in header asterisk, we want vertical line to be middle, and we want display to be inline block, so that they go next to each other but they don't like wrap into each other like word wrap. Padding to be 1 EM so that there's a little bit of spacing, and margin to be 0 EM so that they're right up next to each other. Then we want header image, so all images that are inside the header should be the height of 2 EM with a padding of 0.5 EM. And so that's not everything, but if we go back and hit refresh, it's already starting to look better. Next thing we want to do is .nav. So that the dot means that it's a class with the name of nav, and header span. Actually, we don't need to do header span because we don't have spans in this. I am looking at the exact code. So this is the exact code for my website, and I have it tweaked a bit. So yeah, we don't have header spans in this. And so let's just say color white again, and text align is going to be center, and then text decoration is going to be none. So text align centers the text within the element that has the class nav, and text decoration removes things like strike throughs and underlines. So because we're putting them on anchors which are links usually have underlines on them, but since we're using them more like buttons rather than an actual link, rather than just a text link, we don't want that underline. So we want text decoration none. Then font size would be 1 EM. Then padding is also 1 EM. Padding top is 0.5 EM, and padding bottom is also 0.5 EM. And so that should be everything except the drop down buttons. So if we save that and refresh again, so notice Twitter, YouTube, Discord is showing here instead of as a drop down. So we need to add that now. So dot drop down, and we want its position to be relative, and we want its display to be inline block, and we want its padding to be 0 EM, and we want its Z index to be 2. And so what this means is we want the padding to be 0 EM because this is just the container that contains the drop down button and the menu that pops up. And so we want the padding to be 0 because we don't want any space except for the space within the individual links. Z index of 2 puts it on, make sure it appears on top of everything else, because you don't want the drop down to appear and have it be behind the content of the web page, because then you won't be able to see or click on anything. Also, something I forgot to do earlier is .nav:hover. We want that to say color. I'm just going to do #00ff60 since that's my color. You can do whatever color you want, but what that does is we refresh. Now when we hover over things, they actually show something that you're hovering over. Oh, and in Visual Studio Code, I could drag this around and alter the color however I want. Then drop down content. I want display to be none. And what that does is it makes it so that the drop down content doesn't appear unless we hover over the drop down button. Or actually, what that does is it makes the content not appear. We'll add the hovering part later. So position is not relative. We want it to be absolute. And then background color. Let's say black again. We want it to match the header. And then padding, header is 0 EM. Again, we don't want that container to put any spacing between it and the individual buttons. And then padding left is 1 EM, and padding right is also 1 EM, and then Z index of 1. So one more thing with the header is drop down, hover, and drop down content, display block. And so what this says is anything that's a drop down content that's within a drop down that's being hovered over, it shows the block. So if we refresh, we hover over that and these appear. Now there is one more issue, the padding from the body. So we need to go to style, and in body we want to say padding 0 EM, and go back to here and hit refresh, and it didn't work. So let's check header, padding, margin, padding, margin, padding, margin 0 EM. Well, that worked there. Why is there still a padding at the top? Let's check. Okay, so let's right click here, go to inspect, because Chrome and Edge and Firefox, and I guess every other web browser, provides a nice little tool for inspecting. If we hover here, we see no padding, no margin, no nothing. If we hover here, padding, no margin, no nothing. If we go scroll down, I don't see any thing that would be causing that gap. One moment as I consult my personal web page code. Okay, I'm back and I have found the issue. So, the issue is you can't see it, but there's a greater than sign there because right here I have an extra greater than sign. So if I remove that and hit refresh, there's now no top boundary, or there's no top gap. So if I click home, it takes me to this page I'm already on. If I click Infinity Programming, it takes me here. If I hover social media, it shows me these. If I click Twitter, it takes me to my Twitter page, etc., etc. You could also make this a link, or you could change the padding and margin of the header. If you wanted that gap, you could easily put that gap by putting a header top margin. So here it would be margin top and then whatever size gap you want. So you can modify that header however you want. Now that we have that done, making the footer is very similar. So the way you would want to make the footer is you'd go back to index, and underneath here you want to add footer. And I like to keep my footers very simple and not include much. So I'm going to put it in a span. And a span is like a div, except it's inline instead of block. So you can put whatever text you want in the span, and it word wraps with everything else just as if there was no span, except you can then stylize it with CSS directly on the tag, or by assigning a class to it and CSS, and it would then appear different than the text around it. So I'm going to do ampersand, copy, semicolon, and that gets you the copyright sign, the C with the circle around it. And I'm going to say 2021 Wix 100. And then you can include whatever else you want. I am just going to put an image and say source equals assets pictures Infinity Programming with the alt text Infinity Programming logo. And so then, just as we did with the header, we need to copy that and type in footer, and then new file, footer.css, and then let me bring up the CSS code I have off screen. And then footer is going to be display. I have inline block over there, but it should just be block if I remember correctly. We'll find out. Color, let's make this black as well. And then width, as before, is 100% because we want it to go all the way across. Font size is going to be 1 EM because it's a nice normal font size. Margin is 0 and padding is 0. And did I do background? No, I did color. So let me we want background color to be black, and we want color, because color is the color of the text, we want white. And then margin top, we want 3 EM. And that's so that there's a little bit of space between the content of the page and the footer. It makes it look nice and neater, rather than if, like, immediately after the content you had the footer, it would just look kind of compact, in my point of view, or in my opinion. So then we do footer asterisk, which is, as it was with the header, it's all the elements that are within the footer. Vertical line is gonna be middle. Padding is 1.5 EM. And display is gonna be inline block, so that all the elements in the footer are contained in their own little box, but they're also next to each other instead of on top of each other. Then footer image height is going to be 2 EM, and padding is going to be 1 EM. And so if we save that, and we save that, and we go here and we hit refresh, there's now a footer here. And so, like, if I don't want that to be there, I can go to footer CSS and do float right, refresh, and now it's on the right side of the page. And so this is basically my standard footer as well, except on my actual website. So if we click here, I have the links to my different accounts and pages on different social medias. And so that is how you do a header and a footer. The basic, most important thing about the headers and the footers is that they're at 100% width with no margin and no padding. Well, depending on what you're doing with the interior, you may or may not want the padding. But if you do 0 margin and 100% width, and the body that you're working with doesn't have any padding, then they should go and stretch the entire one end to the other of the page and would look nice. And so that's all I have for you today. Hit the like button down below. Questions, comments, concerns in the comment section. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. Till next time, bye.